Hello and buongiorno amici! I'm Peter and here I'm telling you stories about the most interesting European cars of the 80s and 90s. Today we are talking about one of the most best-selling European cars of the 90s, the Fiat Punto. But before we start, please subscribe to my channel. We almost made it to 1000 subscribers, and I really need your help, my friends, to get to that important milestone. And if you already subscribed, thank you so much! Now, let's get back to the car. The Fiat Punto was produced from 1993 to 2018 in 3 generations. The first one was made from 1993 to 1999 in Italy and Poland. The second generation was produced from 1999 to 2010 in Italy and until 2013 in Serbia under the name Zastava 10. And the third generation, known as the Fiat Grande Punto and later just Fiat Punto again, was manufactured from 2005 to 2018 in Italy, Poland, Brazil and India. Over 9 million cars were made in total, with 3.5 million in the first generation, 3 million in the second and about 2.7 million in the third one. The Punto was the first car for many young drivers across the whole Europe in the 90s and 2000s, and in general was a very popular and significant little working car for millions of European families. My channel is focused on the cars of the 80s and 90s, so today I'm going to talk about the first 2 generations of the Punto. Fiat brought the Punto to the market as a replacement for its ultra-popular small car Fiat Uno, which we will definitely talk about someday. Well, actually the production of the Uno was continued until 2002 in Poland together with Punto, but this is a story for another time. Officially, the Punto became the flagship super mini car of Fiat in 1993. The design of the Punto was developed by the famous Giorgetto Giugiaro, who previously designed the same Fiat Uno and many other glorious cars, including the Lancia Delta, which I have another video about, Saab 9000, which I also have a video about, DMC DeLorean, Volkswagen Golf and Volkswagen Scirocco, which you guess I also have a video about. Well, actually Giorgetto Giugiaro initially wasn't going to make a design for a new Fiat car. He developed this design for Renault Clio in 1990. But Renault decided to go with different design, so Signor Giugiaro proposed his design to Fiat, and after small changes it was approved for the new Fiat Punto. The Punto was offered as a 3-door hatchback or a 5-door hatchback. The hatchbacks of the first generation had the same dimensions disregarding the number of doors. The car was 376 cm or 148 inches long, 162 cm or 64 inches wide, and just 145 cm or 57 inches tall. And it was very light, from just 830 to 1040 kilos or from 1800 to 2300 pounds. Fiat also sold the cargo van option of that little car, with the rear windows replaced with hard panels and the rear row of seats removed. It was very convenient on small streets of old European towns, and it was rather popular. In addition, a convertible version designed by Bertone was available starting from 1995. It wasn't produced in great numbers, and good survived examples are rather valuable now. The design of the Punto was very balanced and modern for its time. Giorgetto Giugiaro was known for straight lines and sharp angles in the 70s and 80s, and he conceived the whole European car design fashion of the 80s with that idea. But in the 90s, and particularly for the Punto, he came to softer lines and roundish curves of appearance of the car, while the external silhouette lines still had some resemblance of straight lines of his previous cars. And the result was really nice and good looking. The Punto had a couple of interesting design solutions. It had very large vertical taillights mounted at the sides of the rear trunk door. This allowed making the trunk opening larger and more convenient for everyday use and loading of large items inside the car. At the same time, large taillights provided the car with additional visibility and safety. The lines of the hood were uninterrupted from the windshield to the front bumper, making the car look integral and helping with the aerodynamics. The Punto didn't have a traditional front grille. Instead, it had just horizontal air vents in the front bumper, and they were enough for cooling the small engine of the car. The main design elements and the overall look of the car continued in the second generation in 1999. The design was updated by the internal design team of Fiat. It looked more modern, but still kept all the distinctive elements of the first generation. The Mark II cars became slightly bigger. The 5-door hatchback now was a little longer than the 3-door cars, giving additional space for the rear passengers. The convertible version was dropped, but the cargo van version was still available. In 2003, the second generation Punto received a serious facelift. The car became even bigger, the headlights and taillights were replaced with more modern ones, and the traditional front grille appeared in the front of the car. The changes were positively accepted by the customers, and the sales of the Punto still were blooming. Inside, the Punto could offer more than you expected. The interior was very modern for the 90s with many circles and ovals according to Italian car design fashion trends of that time. And it was unexpectedly comfortable. The driver and the front passenger had a lot of room, and the seating position was no less comfortable than in bigger cars. Even rear passengers had enough space for a relatively comfortable ride. Of course, it wasn't a large SUV, but the rear row of seats was fully functional for 2 adults, unlike many other small cars where rear seats were usable for kids only. The seats themselves were good and pleasant to sit in. They were not fully electric powered, of course, but they did have many manual adjustments, and you didn't get back pain even after a long drive. The materials of the interior were simple, plastic and synthetic fabric, but they were nice looking and long lasting. Many cars have a fresh looking interior even now, after 30 years. Despite the small size of the car, the Punto had a decent trunk that was enough for all your everyday needs in grocery runs. And if you needed to transport something bigger, say a TV or a washing machine, you could do that as well by folding the rear seats. In the beginning, the simplest versions of Punto were very economically equipped. Let's say honestly, they had nothing. No power steering, no air conditioning, no automatic transmission, no airbags, no electric seats, no electric windows that were manually opened, and even no radio. But you could get all those bells and whistles as options, or at more expensive trim levels. But that cheap trim level actually was very popular. If you needed only a good and inexpensive car just to drive to work and back, the basic Punto, with its price point and relatively good quality and reliability, was the best choice for you in Europe in the 90s and 2000s. And if you wanted more comfort, the Punto had a lot of options. For example, a very interesting electric power steering. On the first cars with the power steering, you could turn it on and off with the button. The power steering was very effective, and the steering wheel was very light when it was in use. You could literally turn it with one finger. It was very convenient at slow speeds, but not so comfortable when you go faster. Modern cars, and the second generation of Punto as well, can automatically adjust the influence of the power steering depending on the speed, but on the first Puntos you had to do it yourself manually. Starting from 1998, the power steering was installed on all Puntos. It had 2 modes, city with lighter steering and highway with less power impact. The city mode automatically switched to the highway mode once the car reached 60 km per hour or 38 miles per hour. But switching it back to the city mode still required the driver to press the relevant button. Despite being a small affordable car, the Fiat Punto was relatively safe. Of course, it didn't have many safety features. ABS was an option, as well as the driver's airbag. The passenger airbag wasn't proposed for the first generation, but 2 front airbags and side airbags were options for the second generation and became standard after the facelift of 2003, as well as the ABS and the traction control system. But nevertheless, the Punto showed good safety results both at crash tests and in real life. The body of the car was designed and built well and protected the passengers in case of a collision. And the steering and the suspension were very good, reliable and predictable. The first generation had a fully independent rear suspension with trailing arms. In the second generation cars, it was replaced with a simpler, but maybe even more comfortable torsion beam rear suspension. The range of engines available for the Fiat Punto was rather wide. 10 engines for the first generation, including 4 diesel engines, and also 10 engines, different ones for the second generation, including 5 diesel engines and 1 propane engine, sold in limited quantities only for the Italian market. All engines were in-line 4-cylinder ones with fuel injection, either single-point or multi-point. For the first generation, the basic engine was a 1.1-liter one with a single-point fuel injection. This engine produced only 53 horsepower, a top speed of 150 km or 94 miles per hour with 0 to 60 miles per hour in 16.5 seconds. It was definitely not a racing car, but it was enough for city driving in heavy traffic. Then there were 3 1.2-liter gasoline engines from 60 to 84 horsepower, a 1.6 gasoline engine with 88 horses, and 3 1.7-liter diesel engines one naturally aspirated with 57 horsepower, and two turbo diesels with 63 and 69 horses. The top speed for the most gasoline engines was around 170-180 km or 106-113 miles per hour with 0 to 60 time from 11 to 14 seconds. The top speed of diesel engines was up to 163 km or 102 miles per hour with 0 to 60 from 15 to 20 seconds. But there was a performance version of the Punto, the Fiat Punto GT, with a 1.4-liter gasoline turbo engine that produced from 128 to 134 horsepower in different years, which was really good for a very lightweight car. The top speed of this version was 205 km or 128 miles per hour with 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds. For the second generation, the 1.1 engine was dropped, and the basic engine now was a 1.2-liter engine with 2 valves per cylinder, producing 59 horsepower, a top speed of 155 km or 97 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 in 14 seconds. There were two different gasoline engines available for performance versions. A 1.2-liter one with 4 valves per cylinder for the Punto Sporting with 80 horses, a top speed of 172 km or 108 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 in 11.4 seconds. And a 1.8-liter engine for the Punto HDT with 129 horny ponies, a top speed of 205 km or 128 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 in 8.6 seconds. There was also a special performance version Punto HDT Abarth, a very rare one, but it was different only in exterior and interior trims, and the mechanical part was identical to the Punto HDT. Most of the Puntos of the first generation had a 5-speed manual transmission, but a 6-speed manual also was available for the basic 1.1-liter engines. The 1.2-liter 60 horsepower cars had an optional CVT automatic transmission. For the second generation, the 5-speed manual still was a basic most common option, but the 1.2-liter sporting trim had a 6-speed manual gearbox. Also for the cars with the 1.2-liter engine with 16 valves, an updated CVT transmission was available. It mimicked the process of switching gears and had 6 virtual gears for regular cars and 7 virtual gears for the sporting trim. For other engines, a robotized automatic or automated manual dual-logic transmission was available as an option. But what about the driving experience? Well, you obviously cannot expect the dynamics of a racing car from a small cheap family mini hatchback, but for its class, the driving capabilities of the Punto were very decent. The car was very light, so even with the smallest engines, Punto could easily keep up with the traffic in cities. And the GT version was a really active and fun to drive car. Its weight per horsepower ratio was better than for the Volkswagen Golf GTI or for the Audi A8. The steering was easy and precise even in cars without a power steering option. The brakes were reliable and the suspension could be softer and comfortable or stiffer and sportier depending on which version of the Punto you had and how you were going to use it. Fiat even built a real small sports car on the platform of the Punto, but with a more powerful engine, the Fiat Barchetta. But that car deserves its own story, and we'll talk about it someday in the future. Both two generations of the Punto were smooth and quiet cars. The wind noise could be a little annoying, but the engine was almost silent. And it was built with good quality, particularly considering its price. The prices for the basic version of the Punto in Italy in 1993 started at 13 million Italian lire, which is about just $7,300 in today's money. And for that very affordable price you received a lot of car. Not too fast, but comfortable, convenient for every situation, and reliable. For many young European drivers in the 90s and 2000s, the Fiat Punto was the first car. And for many families, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, it became a trustworthy friend for many years. In addition to the cheap price of the car itself, it had a great fuel economy and it was very affordable to maintain. The parts were and still are cheap, and simple engines didn't require expensive works. Of course, it had some issues. The rust proofing wasn't a strong point of the Punto, particularly for cars produced in Poland, which were not thin galvanized like Italian cars. But even Puntos made in Italy were very prone to rust. So, if you are planning to buy a Fiat Punto now, pay specific attention to the condition of the metal. But apart from that, it was a good, very popular and significant car. A car that raised up a whole generation of European drivers. A car that was more popular than the Volkswagen Golf at some point and became the absolutely best-selling European cars in 1997. And it may be controversial, but I believe that the Punto was a very sustainable car. It consumed little fuel, it was universal in its application, it didn't require much resources to maintain it didn't spend fossil fuel for air conditioning in most of the cars, because they didn't have air conditioner, and it lived for decades and hundreds of thousands of miles. Maybe at the end of the day it was actually better for the environment than our modern large and expensive electric cars, requiring trillion investments into the generation and transfer of electricity. Anyway, the Fiat Punto was a very interesting and significant car for Europe in the 90s, starting from its design and ending with its extreme popularity, and it deserves to be remembered and praised. Well, everybody recognized another Fiat car, the Fiat F50, sometimes also referred to as the Ferrari F50, as an iconic car of the 90s. But how many people really owned that car? Just several hundred. And the Fiat Punto was an integral part of the lives and memories of millions of families. So which of those cars was really more important for automotive history? Unfortunately, the Fiat Punto never was sold in the United States. But almost all first-generation cars are older than 25 years now, and early second-generation cars approach this threshold. So you can legally import them to the United States and become an owner of something really unique here. And they are still very affordable. The prices for both the first and the second generations of Punto start literally from just 200 euros in Europe now, and go up to 7,000 euros for low-mileage cars in great condition. The GT, HDT and convertible versions are more expensive, and a good example will cost you between 8 and 20,000 euros, depending on its condition and your negotiation skills. Well, thank you very much for watching. If you drove or owned a Fiat Punto of any generation, please tell me about your personal experience in the comments below. Thank you so much for sharing your impressions and thoughts. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. New interesting stories are coming soon. Grazie mille amici, and see you next time!